This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We're learning Sefer Ezra, Parak Yud, Pasuk Yud Ches. We're on the stretch run, the final run of Sefer Ezra. And Vayimatzei mibnei HaKohanim, they found from the children of the Kohanim, Asher Hoishivu Nashim Nachrios, the ones that harbored alien women, Mibnei Yeshua ben Yotzadak, from the children of the Kohen Gadol, we said Yeshua Kohen Gadol, V'Yachav and his brothers, Ma'aseya, Eliezer, V'Yarav, Ugedalia. Okay, so what do they tell them to do? Vayitnu Yadam, Rashi says, Yadam means Atzasam. In other words, they gave them advice, Lahaitzi Nesheim, to get rid of their wives, Va'ashemim El Tzayin Al Ashmasam, and bring a guilt offering for their guilt. Now, what kind of guilt offering do they have to bring for living with Goyim? There's no ordained carbon for marrying a guy. It's a lav in the Torah, but there's no prescribed carbon that has to be brought. So Rashi says, Al Ashmasam Hayra Asha. This was a one-time special, a special occasion, and even though normally the Chachamim don't have the right to say just bring a carbon. Why? Because if you just bring a carbon, you're bringing chulin into the azar. You're actually you're violating the kedusha of the mikdash. Become asay.
Why couldn't they bring in a davar?
What?
Can't you bring in a davar?
Not as a carbon asham. Not an asham, right? So in this case, Rashi says this was a special hayra asha. Comes the Malbim, and the Malbim says that in
order to be a harasha, doesn't Bezdin have to?
Bezdin, yeah. So Bezdin, exactly. Bezdin.
The three doesn't have to be.
No, the Bezdin Hagadol, the Gdalei Hadar determined this was appropriate for this situation to bring a special carbon. However, the Malbim points out, based on the Gemara in Krisos Daf Yud Aleph, that in fact this did call for a carbon asham. Why? Because there's something called Asham Charufa, right? Asham Shivcha Charufa, which means like this: that if a person has relations with a Shivcha Kananis who is engaged to marry an Eved Ivri, if you live with her, then you have to bring an Asham Charufa. So says the Gemara in Krisos, in fact, this is what happened. The Jews in those days, they lived with Shivcha Kananis, who we know that a Jewish man is not allowed to live with a Shivcha Kananis, but an Eved Ivri is allowed to live with a Shivcha Kananis. So if Shivcha Kananis that is engaged to marry an Eved Ivri, if you live with her and you violate, so to speak, her formal relationship that she's engaged to marry the Eved Ivri, you have to bring an Asham. So the question is, why would Rashi have to say this is a Hayra Asha? Rashi is arguing on the Gemara in Krisos. So if you take a look,
because it says here Nashim, it doesn't say Shivcha. I mean, the lashon of the
good, but Rashi still can't argue on the Gemara. The Gemara teaches it to mean they were a Shivcha Charufa, a Shivcha that was Necharefes La'ish.
Then why would you have to chase them away? If it was a Shivcha,
no, because she's a guy.
So what? But it's a Shivcha. It's not your wife. You're not allowed to have Shvachot?
You're allowed to have them, you can't live with them. You can't have relations with them.
But if you live with them, you still have to chase them away?
Of course you have to chase them away. If you're continuously living with them, you got to chase them out. You want to know, could they still sweep your floors? I don't think after you've been living with them.
Yeah, you would have to chase them out.
No, so yeah, you have to get rid of them. So the Gemara says in Krisos, Anaf Yud Aleph, the Malbim quotes, Shabalu Shivcha Charufa, L'chein hayu mechuyavim el Asham Kedin. Uvazei Yitztak, and according to the way the Gemara reads the pasuk, the lashon of va'ashemim is very good. Ki b'shivcha charufa eno chayv rakim baal kedarkoi v'gamar b'yasai v'alkein amru loy shnayim ba'alta shivcha charufa v'omer loy ba'alti eno chayv sheyesh lefarish loy gamarti b'yasi k'mashas b'krisis imkein yev shel chayvoi el lashon ha'idei edim rakim atzmam hoidu shem ha'shemim sha'idei ken chayim l'havi el tzayin. Says a Malbim a very interesting thing. To be chayiv a carbon asham for having relations with the shivcha charufa, you had to consummate the act of cohabitation. You can't just do ha'ara. Ha'ara is the beginning of the biyah. You have to be able to consummate the act. It has to be a biyah gemura, complete penetration. So what's the halach if two Eidim come and say, you lived with the Shivcha Charufa, the guy could say, "How do you know?" So we were watching. You don't know. You don't know exactly what happened. You're only chayiv in asham if the guy is moideh that yes, indeed, it was a bia gemura. So therefore, that fits very good into the lashon va'ashemim, and they themselves made themselves guilty alad masham for their guilt. In other words, the only time you would bring a carbon asham charufa is if what? If they are moideh. So that fits very good into the lashon of va'ashemim alad masham.
Shifra charufa is a Canaanist or an Ivri?
Shifra charufa,
Jewish slave,
a non-Jewish slave that's engaged to marry an Eved Ivri. A non-Jewish slave that's engaged to marry.
I think you weren't allowed to testify against yourself. You know, you couldn't incriminate yourself. So
That's another Mesim Atzmai Rasha. That's in terms of Malchus. In terms of carbon, let's say you flick down a light on Shabbos. You can't bring a carbon chatos? Yeah, you can. To get kapara, you can. So now the question is, why did they chase them away? Just free them. If you free them, they're Megayer. If they're Megayer, you could then Gershon is Gayer, Kakatan Shenoi Ladami.
but these are the Kohanim.
So these were Kohanim, and they can't. Why can't you live with a Shivcha, a guy? Why can't a Kohen live with a convert? Because a guy has a din of a Zaina, because you don't know what they were doing. And that's why they were given the advice to divorce them. Like a Kohen that marries an Isha that the Kohen's usher to. Now Rashi says, the Malbim writes that this was a Hirashah. Says the Malbim, this is a Tmiyah. Rashi is a tremendous question. Rashi is very shver. Rashi is very difficult because Rashi is against the Gemara. Says the Malbim, an amazing chiddush, that Rashi is going according to his shita in the Masechta Gittin, that during Bayasheni, Yovel was not noyeg. Why was Yovel not noyeg? Because most Jews were not in Eretz Yisrael. You need Roiv Kol Yoshvei Allah. And Rashi holds the din of Eved Ivri is only applicable when Yovel is applicable. And since Rashi holds the din of Eved Ivri is only applicable when Yovel is applicable, so during the times of Ezra, there was no such thing as an Eved Ivri. If there's no such thing as an Eved Ivri, there's no such thing as a Shivcha Charufa. There's no such thing as a Shivcha engaged to marry an Eved Ivri, right? You can't be engaged to marry an Eved Ivri if there are no Eved Ivrim. You hear that chiddush? Right? You can't be engaged to marry an Eved Ivri if there's no Eved Ivri. So therefore, Rav Chisda, who says in the Gemara in Krisos that the Jews in the times of Ezra lived with a Shivcha Charufa, Rav Chisda must have been going according to a very minority view that a Shivcha Charufa is Shivcha Kananis engaged to marry a guy. But since Rashi holds, like the other Shita, like Rabbi Akiva and others, and Rabbi Huda, that the din of Shivcha Charufa is only if you're engaged to marry an Eved Ivri, therefore Rashi had to learn that this episode over here is talking about, it was a special Hirasha. In other words, Rashi holds that the din of Shivcha Charufa is only if you're engaged to marry an Eved Ivri, and there were no Eved Ivris in the times of Bayasheni. And therefore Rashi would have to say that Reb Chisda, who says that the reason the Jews brought the Asham over here is because they lived with a Shivcha Charufa, that's going according to the Shita that a Shivcha Charufa is even if she's engaged to marry a guy.
but there is no Shifra charufa because if there's no Yovel.
No, not the din of Shivcha Charufa is not dependent on Yovel. The existence of it being an Eved Ivri can only be an Eved Ivri if there's a din of Yovel.
So a charufa is
well, that's the Maglokas. What does the Harufa mean?
Right.
Why is a shift, according to Rav Chisda, if you say this way, that it has to be a shift, Aruba is a guy engaged to marry a guy?
Yeah.
What's the difference of a shivcha, not a shivcha? What's the difference? It's a guy to a guy. Well, what's that? What makes the status of a shivcha change this situation?
Why is there a special asham only a shivcha engaged to marry to a guy? Why not any guy, a girl engaged to marry? I don't know. It's Exer Sakasa.
No, the being engaged to a Eved Ivri can only be a Shivcha.
No, but
So-
what about
so-
according to the opinion that it's talking about engaged to a guy?
Yeah, but the whole discussion started talking about the Shita that held she had to be engaged to an Eved Ivri. So that's where that's where we got into this.
Correct. But
So now that with the other Shita, you don't have to have that.
right. No, right. Okay.
If you have relations with a guy who's not a shivcha, but engaged to another guy, does it make a difference?
No.
So now if you have relations with a guy shivcha who's engaged, what's the difference?
It's exercise cause special din. Special din. It's a Torah mandated punishment. Okay.
If a guy shivcha is engaged to an Eved Ivri,
Yes. Then
and then the Eved Ivri becomes Ice Eved Ivri. You know, they didn't get married.
he's freed.
He's free. He's a 6 years of Rav. What's the status?
No, then he's not engaged, and then he can't be living with the shivcha anymore.
Isn't this all
Can you marry her?
Because since the
He has
Churban,
to move a guy,
Yeah.
there
right?
have been no avodim, no Eved Penani, no Shifra.
No, but now we're talking about in the times of the second Beis
The
Hamikdash.
second base of Mikdash, that status didn't exist.
According to Rashi, but according to Tosfos, they did have Eved Ivri is not dependent on Yovel. So during Bayis Sheni, according to Tosfos, they did have avodim.
The whole
Right.
idea of the ship
Okay.
was so that the Baal could get.
Now Rabbi said the din of avodim, could be very relevant even today.
Whoa,
How?
let's get some.
For example, let's say somebody is a mamzer. So what? How do they? Now their children are going to be mamzerin. How are you matire the children?
Marry Nevid, huh?
You marry an eved, and then the children are avodim. You marry a shivcha, the children are avodim, and then you free them. Okay, so let's see over here.
How's it relevant today? We don't have
Not a month anymore.
No, you go to Afriki, and you purchase a shivcha kananis.
And then you get the Human Rights Watch.
For Saudi Arabia, no.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
No problem.
Human rights is
Those
only
kids,
if
those
they
kids come before the switch over?
Yeah.
Kids are born first as
Boko Haram.
Mamzer.
No, they're born as avodim.
No, but you said, how do you get them
out of mamzeros.
No, the
You
children.
can't
the
have children
of
ahead
the
of time.
No, it's the children of the mamzerim.
No, you
Right,
can't be
that's
marry
right.
yourself, but you get if you live.
generation.
Yeah, the next generation. Yeah. Pasuk Chaf. Now here are the names of the Kohanim who lived with Goyim. Umimnei Imer, from the sons of Imer, Chanoni, Uzavadia, and these are names of families. If you remember that we mentioned in the beginning of the Sefer, families who came up to Eretz Yisrael. These are their descendants who married Goyim. Umimnei Chorim, Ma'aseya ve'Eliya u'Shemaya v'Chiel ve'Uzia. Umibnei Pashchor, El Yoyenai Ma'aseya Yishmael Nesanel Yoizavad ve'Elasa. These were all names of families of Kohanim, of individual Kohanim that married Goyim. Umin Halavim Yoizavad v'Shimi v'Keilaya hu Kalita. Now, because you're going to be wondering, who's Kelaya? I don't know Kelaya. No, you should know. Who Kelita? He was known by another name. Now you know who he is.
That clarifies the whole thing.
Yeah. Pesachia, Yehuda, Eliezer. Umin HaMeshorim, the singers. You know, these guys had good CDs. They put out good Jewish Nagunim. The only thing is, they married a Shiksa. El Yashiv. Umin HaShoyarim, the gatekeepers. Shalom, Vatelem, Va'uri. Umi Yisrael. Mimnei Parosh, Ramya, V'Yizia, Umalkia, Umiyamin, V'Elazar, Umalkia, Uvenaya, Umnei Elam, Matanya, Zechariah, V'Chiel, V'Avdi, V'Remois, V'Elia, Umnei Zatu.
Where did we have the Elam before? Didn't we have the Bnei Elam previously in this Navi mentioned?
Well, Elam is also sometimes referring to Bavel. The word Elam. Okay, Matanya, Zechariah, V'Chiel, V'Avdi, V'Remois, V'Elia. Umnei Zatu. These names we had: El Yoyenai, El Yashiv, Matanya, V'Remois, V'Zavad, V'Aziza. Ubnei Bevai, Yehochanan, Chananya, Zabai, Asa. It's good to know if you ever need names, you have any children, grandchildren, you ran out of names. You know? There you go. Ubnei Bani, right?
Funny, okay.
Meshulam, Malach, Va'adaya, Yashuv, Usha'al, Yeramais. But it's Kri Viramais. Okay. Umimnei Pachas Mayav, and the descendants of the governor of Mayav. We learned in the beginning of the Sefer, this refers to the family of David HaMelech, that they were called governors of Mayav because he in fact came from Mayav.
Right.
Mayav. In fact, the Kotzker says that Malchus was only in Mayav, and we had to go to Mayav to get Malchus. So the Shem Shmuel says, well, what's the Zayda talking about? What do you mean Malchus is found in Mayav? So he says that really, Malchus is something that is cannot be found among the Jewish people. It's not a midah that you can have among the Jewish people, because since Klal Yisrael is one entity, you can't have one person being misnase over another. We're all one. So it's something we had to sort of usurp from Mayav, because we know the klipa of Mayav is Geyas. Like it says about Mayav, Mayav ga'a ma'oid. Mayav had this midah of gaiva. So we had to usurp this gaiva that Mayav had, and we took it for ourselves in order to employ the Malchus. That's why some gaiva is good. Sometimes you need gaiva.
Yaakov's bracha from Yehuda.
Yeah.
His bracha is that you should be zeicher to steal this midah from Mayav.
Steal. Okay, I got it.
He didn't say
Which
steal.
word is to steal it?
Yeah, we got to get it. He gave him a bracha. He should be king, but in order to be king, there was a midah that was foreign to the Jewish people that we needed, used in the right way. We had to take it from Mayav. Okay, and
You mean Gaiva was entirely foreign to Bnei Yisrael? I mean, we had a shiur about one of the reasons Moshe didn't go into Eretz Yisrael because he took credit for the water, right? And Hashem said, why'd you take credit for that?
that's not enough gaiva to be king. You need more gaiva than that. You need more than that to be a melech. There's a concept of gaiva de kedusha. The concept that sometimes you need to act in a external, arrogant way for the position, right? Like Rabbi Huda told his sons. Rabbi told his sons, "Nahag nesiyascha berama." You have to conduct the position in a high way, in a lofty way. Okay, so let us continue. Uvnei Charim, Eliezer, Yeshia, Malkiah, Shemaiah, Shimon, Binyamin, Malach, Shemaria, Uvnei Chusham, Matnai, Matata, Zavad, Elifelet, Yeremai, Menashe, Shimi, Mibnei Vani. Back to Bunny. That was Bunny. This is Vani.
Oh, Bunny and Bunny.
Right? Actually, it's the same thing. Why?
Well, this one is a Munachsa Kev Katan. The other one has a Tipcha, which means it's
separate, right?
Separate.
In other words, whenever you have a Beged Kefes letter, whenever you have a letter that has a dagesh in it, preceded by any of the vowels, let's say a yud, so then let's say in pasuk chaf, let's say pasuk lamed dalid, so the word bunny should have a dagesh in it, but it drops the dagesh because it's preceded by a vowel.
Right.
But in pasuk chavtes, where there's a tipcha after the word umnei bunny, so then you pause. It's a melech. So therefore, the word bunny is not connected to the word umibnei, right? Like we had in the difference between the different sets of Aser Sadibros. You have the Tamelion and the Tam Tachton, right? The way we read it, Loi Tignaiv, right? Loi Tinaf. Why? But there's an aleph before the taf. The answer is there's a tipcha. In the Tamelion there's a tipcha. But in the Tam Tachton it's Loi Sirtzach v'Loi Sinaf. It's a mercha tipcha, and therefore it does not drop. It therefore drops the dagish. Okay. So Uvnei Vani Ma'adai Amram ve'U'el Benoya Vedia Kulhu. Okay. Vanya Meremos Elyashiv. Elyashiv was a very popular name. Matanya Matnai v'Ya'asoi Uvani Uvinoi Shimi Vishalemya V'Nasan v'Adaya Machnadvai Shoshai Sharoi Azarel Vishalemyahu Shemaria. One thing is they definitely had Jewish names, right? Shalom Amaria Yosef.
Well, lucky this doesn't come out to be a bar mitzvah party.
Yeah.
The Bacha would have real trouble.
Mibnei Nevoi Yeiel Matzisya Zavad Zvina Yadai V'Yoyel Benoya. Kol Eila Nasu Nashim Nachriyas. All these guys, they married Goyim. V'yesh mehem Nashim. Some of them had wives. Vayasimu banim, and they placed children. Now, what is this expression? They placed children. What do you mean they placed? It should say Vayolidu banim. They gave birth to children.
Well, the Yolidu maybe implies that they were Jewish. But Yasimu means they just procreated.
Right. So the Malbim says, why does it say Vayasimu? The answer is because they were not their children, because they were Goyim. So therefore it says Vayasimu. However, the Ibn Ezra writes like this: that these people were Meiser Nefesh, that they wanted to do the right thing, they wanted to listen to Ezra, and therefore they took their children and they placed them before the family heads to ask their advice what to do to them. Should they chase them out or should they bring them close? So they literally took their children and they placed them before them. Now, Rabbi, so we learned last week that really we know there are 24 books in Tanakh. You have 5 books in the Chumash. You have in the Nevi'im, what do you have? Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Treasa, 8 in the Nevi'im. And in Ksuvim, how many do you have?
5.
Good, you have 11. You have the 5 Megillas, right? Echa, Esther, Shir, Shirim, Rus, Koheles. And then you have the Sifrei Emes, Eiv, Mishlei, Tehillim. Then you have what? Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniel, Divrei Hayamim. These are the 24 books of Tanakh. So the question is, so what about Ezra and Nehemiah? Is Ezra and Nehemiah a separate book or is it one book?
You said it's separate.
Yes, somewhat. Yes.
Well, who said?
I thought I heard.
So if you look in the Gemara Bava Basra, and according to our count, it's only one. There are only 24 books.
What time it was?
Right? So, why now exactly are they 2? So you could say, well, the same reason that Shmuel is 2, and Malachim is 2, and the Hayamim is 2. Why are they 2? Because the Christian printers made them 2. Right? We don't believe in, we have one book. So too, Ezra and Nehemiah. However, for some reason, Ezra and Nehemiah really took off, and even we definitely give it a certain separate status. And if you look in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the Gemara asks that who wrote Sefer Ezra Nehemiah? And therefore the Gemara asks, why is it called Sefer Ezra? But Nehemiah wrote it. I mean, the whole thing is called Ezra. If anything, the whole thing should be called Nehemiah. To which the Gemara answers that one time Nehemiah davened to Hashem, remember my tzidkus, so he took credit for himself. So since he took credit for himself, he lost credit, and therefore the Sefer is named Sefer Ezra. However, the Chida in the Sefer Maris Ha'ayin brings down from the Makubal, Rabbi Yisrael Saruk, that Ezra was the Gilgal of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Ram Gamliel was and Nehemiah was the Gilgal of Ram Gamliel. And because Ram Gamliel in Masechta Brachos took too much power to himself, he was punished that he had to step down from his Nesias. And he was also punished that Nehemiah lost credit for the name of the Sefer. But once Nehemiah, now once Ram Gamliel was punished that he had to step down, so he ended up becoming Nasi again. And they reinstated him, but they split up the weeks.
Right.
So too, once Nehemiah got punished that he lost the first part of Sefer Ezra, so then even though originally what was it supposed to be? Just Nehemiah. But then when Nehemiah got his punishment because Gamliel stepped down, so once the times of the Mishnah, so then we give him back part of the name. We give him back Sefer Nehemiah. In other words.
Now they separated together in the 24 books.
So that's a very good question. Are they separate or are they together? And that's what we just answered. And the answer is that, again, that the Gemara says Nehemiah was supposed to be, Nehemiah lost his name. Why? Because he took credit. But once he got punished, how was he punished? When Gamliel stepped down, once when Gamliel stepped down, so he got rewarded that we still call it Sefer Nehemiah, but it's under the umbrella still of one Sefer Ezra.
24 books.
So there's still 24.
It's not counted separately.
It's not counted separately, but it's given a separate name.
I understand.
You know, it's like a lot of things in this world. Well, are they? Okay. Okay, let's start. We'll start. So Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish Sefer Ezra. Baruch Hashem should give us siyata d'shmaya. We should learn all chaf dalet svarim, lomod l'lamed, lishmar v'lasos. Okay, so let's begin Sefer Nehemiah. I think they have actually an English one also. If you want to get yourself a copy, but let's begin Sefer Nehemiah. Divrei Nehemiah ben Chachlaya. These are the words of Nehemiah, the son of Chachlaya. Vayihi b'chodesh Kislev. It was in the month of Kislev. Shnas Esrim, in the 20th year. Now, of who? We don't know. Va'ani ha'yisi, and where was I? Like all good Jews, we all start out b'Shushan Habira, right? He was a good Persian Jew, right? So that's what Nehemiah starts out in Shushan Habira. Now, the 20th year of who? Says Rashi, the 20th year of Daryavesh. Which Daryavesh? Artaxshasta. Now, which Daryavesh is Artaxshasta?
Wasn't that the second?
I think it was the second one. It was the second one.
Wasn't derived the mead. Wouldn't have been derived the mead. It would have been derived the Persian.
Right. The son of Esther. Yeah. Vayovoi Chanoni. Chanoni came to me. Echad meyachai. One of my brothers. Hu va'anoshim Yehuda. He and a bunch of men from Yehuda. Va'eshalem. I asked him. Al ha'Yehudim ha'pleta. About the remnant Jews asher nisharu, that had survived min hashavi, from captivity, va'al Yerushalayim, and over Yerushalayim. Take a look at the Malbim.
Do we know, by the way, if Nehemiah at this stage had anything to do as a government official in the reign of Daryavesh II?
We don't know nothing about Nehemiah. We don't know anything about him.
Now, we're starting, Nehemiah is starting, 10 years after the end of Ezra? They say Ezra?
Where does Nehemiah start? We don't know. No information is given, except for it was the 20th year. It doesn't even say the 20th year of who. It does not even tell us which king. So the Malbim says, like we pointed out from Rashi, this was the 20th year of Artaxshasta's reign. How do we know? Well, because that's what we just spoke about in Sefer Ezra.
Right.
So says the Malbim, from here we see that this book is a continuation of Sefer Ezra, like we just quoted the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that's comments, Michti kol mili de Ezra Nehemiah amrinu. And says the Malbim, if you count the 24 books, Ezra and Nehemiah is only counted as one. Because if you're going to count it as two separate books, then the Navi should have been explicit and said the 20th year of who? In other words, the fact that no information is given about Nehemiah means this is a continuation of Sefer Ezra. Now,
Why do we assume Ezra was before Nehemiah, second Nehemiah?
Why do? Oh, because that's the order that it's given to us in. Now, what year, when Ezra comes back to Yerushalayim, what year was that? Also, it doesn't say exactly. It was the 7th year. It was the 7th year of Artaxshasta. So this must be 13 years later. Okay? 13 years later. So basically Nehemiah wants a report.
Ezra would have been there all the time and didn't send back any messages?
This is in the 20th year of Artaxshasta.
So Ezra was ready in Yerushalayim for 13 years.
Ezra was there, and this guy, Chanoni, goes back to Shushan Habira, together with some other men, and Nehemiah asks, Nu, was titzach in Yerushalayim? So what's the report? Vayom Ruli, they said to me, Hanisharim, the remnants, Asher Nisharu min Hashvi, Sham, that survived the captivity, Ba Medina, Bira Gedoyla Uvecharpa, in great evil and great disgrace. V'choimas Yushalayim mifayratzes. The walls of Yushalayim are breached. Usha'areha, and its gates, Nisisu Va'ish, are consumed in fire.
They didn't empty out the Jews after they assassinated Gaddafi?
What? Now, again, Jews have been returning for the last 20 years already.
I'm confused
There
with
are many Jews have returned, but the state, the infrastructure of the city was very weak. The walls were breached, the gates were burned.
Darius gave Ezra authority to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. And that was
Not Ezra.
Koresh who gave the other guy.
Koresh. And they didn't. But then who built it? Who was involved in building it? I think Yehoshua Kohen Gadol and Zerubbabel. So yeah, but the walls of Yerushalayim were still in bad shape. The gates were in bad shape. The infrastructure was weak. And again, Ezra's role was not merely, he had the most important role to mechazek the Jewish observance, the Torah. But in terms of the infrastructure, this is going to be Nehemiah's task. So he says, now Nehemiah responds, Al Rishon Rishon Ve'al Achron Achron. He asked them about the Jews.
And they reported back about the infrastructure.
V'al Yerushalayim, and the city. So they first said, the Jews, the remnants that are there, are in great evil and in great disgrace, and the walls are breached. So says Nehemiah, Vayihi kishami es hadvar me'el. When I heard this, Yashavti, I sat, Va'evka, I cried, Va'as'abala, and I mourned, Yamim, for days. Va'ehi tzam, I was in fasting, U'mispalel, L'fnei Elokai Hashemayim, before the God of heaven.
Could you just tie together for me Ezra and Nehemiah? Ezra has been in Yerushalayim for 20 years.
13 years.
13 years, I'm sorry. 13 years.
How do you know that?
Because he was there, he left in year 7. He got to Yerushalayim in year 7 of Dayavesh. And this is, according to Rashi, this is year 20. So Nehemiah had no reports, wasn't interested, didn't go to Yerushalayim for 13 years.
Well, we'll have to see. What's Nehemiah doing in Shushan? I mean,
living a good life.
Why is he in Shushan? Also, who is Nehemiah? Who is Nehemiah? We had earlier. We identified Nehemiah. Ezra, we said, is the Navi Malachi. But who's Nehemiah? Who is Nehemiah? We will have to see. Was Nehemiah at all active in Sefer Ezra?
No.
Did Nehemiah appear in Sefer Ezra?
No. Behind the scenes.
He wrote the book, you would assume that somewhere he's alluding to himself, if not openly, between the lines. So it's hard to imagine that with everything that was said here, and he knew, he wrote what was going on with Ezra, that he wasn't somehow referenced or alluded to.
What I say, stay tuned for more information about who is Nehemiah, and everyone is invited to a little Siyum. Is it a Siyum or is it not a Siyum? It's a half a Siyum. It's a Siyum on the fact that the Sefer has a different name, but it's not a Siyum on the whole Sefer.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.